ॐ जननीं शारदां देवीं रामकृष्णं जगद्गुरुं पादपद्मे तयो श्रित्वा प्रणमामि मुहुर्मुहुः. We were discussing Holy Mother's Gospel, and the conversation which was recorded by Yogin Ma, which forms the second part of the Gospel of the Holy Mother. This part of the Gospel was translated by Swami Prabhanandji, because as you know, Mayar Katha was in several parts. They were published in several installments. So the first installment, the first part of this book, Gospel of the Holy Mother, Part 1, they comprise of reminiscences recorded by Saryu Bala and others, Swami uh, Ras Bihari Maharaj, Swami Arupananda. We just finished that, and now we are discussing the second part. One of the most intimate disciples of Holy Mother, who was her companion, and also after the passing away of Sri Ramakrishna, Yogin Ma permanently stayed with Holy Mother. Wherever she went, she accompanied her to different places of pilgrimage, and also she was she was a disciple of Thakur. Actually, she had got her initiation from Sri Ramakrishna. So she was Sri Ramakrishna's disciple, but Holy Mother's companion. So as we read last time, not last time, it's several days since we last took the Holy Mother's class. We had Gita last Saturday. We were discussing Bhagavad Gita, but today it is the Gospel of Holy Mother, where we come to the conversation where she is telling about the days they spent at Dakshineshwar. Perhaps this was recorded after Holy Mother's Mahasamadhi. So maybe these reminiscences were not only recorded in Bengali but also translated into English much later. So she is telling about the Dakshineshwar days when Mother had hardly a few minutes of rest. She says she was so busy for the devotees who had come. She used to make chapatis out of 3.5 seers of coarse flour. That was normally the quantity. Three and a half seers is quite a big amount. I mean, to make chapatis, to roll it and then make chapatis out of it, it was very difficult. Apart from that, there was a most of the Bengalis used to eat betel leaves, chew betel leaves, but that pan had to be prepared. Those betel leaves had to be prepared. Some cardamom and other things, lime paste and other things had to be applied and folded in a particular way, and those were taken as they used to give it after the people had their lunch or dinner. Then she would boil down the milk meant for the master. Now, this was a very important thing because the Sri Ramakrishna could not take many of the food items. He could not eat, partly because of his disease, and he was also sick. His stomach also, even before the cancer was detected, it was very difficult for Sri Ramakrishna to digest all sorts of food, because during his sadhana, especially the uh, because he did not eat for several days, and there was no fixed time for meals when Holy Mother was not there. Hriday was the only sevak, and sometimes he went into samadhi and he forgot to eat. In fact, many times he had to be reminded that he should be eating something. So as a result, he suffered from terrible problems of the stomach. So naturally, he most of the food items he could not consume, but he was very fond of cream or the cream of the milk, which was a very nutritious diet in those days. So Holy Mother decided to condense the milk that he used to consume so much that the milk, often lot of milk would be condensed so that he gets all the nutrition. So it took long hours for the milk to condense. We had to boil it continuously, so that she had to keep a watch over that. And then a special soup had to be prepared for him because he could not digest anything and everything. And then she used to take his food. As long as his mother lived, she used to take the food, prepare meals for Sri Ramakrishna's mother as well, who used to stay in the Nabat. And because she was not able to walk around, move around, so she used to take that, serve her, take food to the master, Sri Ramakrishna. Very often she had to take. Sometimes, of course, if she was busy, she used to send it with Yogin Ma or somebody. But most of the time, she had to serve Sri Ramakrishna also. After the death of Holy Mother, of Sri Ramakrishna's mother, that is Chandramani Devi, who lived on the first floor of the Nahabat, where Sri Ramakrishna used to meet her daily and inquire about her welfare, about her health, as long as she was alive. But after his passing away, he used to dine in his living room. Otherwise, he used to go and take food with his own mother. He had so much love for his own mother that he would not eat before his mother was fed. To ensure that, he would go there, sit in he used to walk all the way to Nahabat, go to his mother's room, and Holy Mother used to serve them food. Then after dinner or lunch, he used to come back. As long as his mother lived in the Nahabat, he used to take his food there. After her death, he used to dine in his living room. He used to live in a separate room. That room is famous now. It is there in Dakshineshwar. As you all know, Holy Mother used to live in Nahabat, continue to live in the Nahabat. Sometimes after Sri Ramakrishna's mother passed away, some of the women companions used to stay with Holy Mother, like Yogin Ma. So on the day when many male disciples were not present, like Master Masha and all, the Holy Mother had an extra duty, as we saw last time, that the master's body had to be rubbed with oil because he had a very dry skin. And most of the people there in the hot sun, it's a very common to apply oil before taking a bath in the Ganges. So sometimes when there were some male devotees were there, most of the sevaks like Latu Maharaj and others, if they were there, they would do this. They had the privilege to apply oil to the master's body. Otherwise, Holy Mother herself had to do it. So you can imagine how much work she had to do. And all this, apart from getting up early in the morning, Thakur insisted on her getting up very early. Of course, she used to get up, but for some reason, if she was sick, even then Sri Ramakrishna used to go and wake her up. But she used to get up, then go to the Ganges, take a bath early, because women normally took bath early. They didn't have separate bathrooms. It is so strange that in those days, all these things, they did not have attached bathrooms and all. So she had to go early in the morning, finish all her bath before even sunrise, and then come and then follow this routine, do her meditation, lakhs and lakhs of japa she used to do. So all these things. One day, Master asked Golab Didi once to bring his meals to his room. From that day, Golab Didi carried the master's meals every day. So the Holy Mother, though she had very few opportunities to meet the master, she used to, even that opportunity was denied, because Golab Didi, who was Golab Ma, as she was known later, but Yogin Ma calls her Golab Didi. She was also one of the women companions or women companions of Holy Mother, but a disciple of Sri Ramakrishna. So she was, when she started coming to Thakur, she used to ask many spiritual questions, and she had the privilege of his company and his satsang for a long time. But Holy Mother did not mind. Nobody uh, see the amount of detachment she had. Many people say that Holy Mother and Thakur lived, they were householders, they had married, but you see the type of uh, relationship they had. Not only did she not mind that she was denied the opportunity of meeting her husband even once in a day, which was because she could go and at least give him his lunch or dinner, carry his food. But even when she was deprived, she did not mind. And Golab Didi used to spend long hours discussing spiritual things, and she had absolutely no envy or jealousy or anything. But but in spite of that, in spite of the fact that after Golab Ma or Golab Didi, as she was called by Yogin Ma, came back, till she came back, Holy Mother used to wait for her. You imagine the amount of patience. First of all, you are spending so much time with Thakur, discussing all those things when you ought to give the food, and after he's finishing his lunch or dinner, she should have come back. But many times she would come late and Holy Mother had to wait. So one day, even she lost patience because she knew that it was not necessary. What is the point in so much satsang? She had to go there. Then one day she said, let this food be eaten by a dog or a cat. I will not wait for it. She had to prepare her thali or the plate and arrange everything and wait for her and then eat and then take care of it, because if you leave these things open, the cats would come and eat it. So the next day, Thakur came to know about this. So he used to tell Gulab Didi, you spend a long time here, you should go back. It causes lot of inconvenience to the mother. So Sri Ramakrishna was so considerate. He said, see, don't inconvenience her. I don't mind if I'm delayed, but you should not keep her. She has to keep watch over your food. Then, even then, Gulab Didi did not realize, because mother was so kind and kind hearted. She says, no, mother loves me very much and calls me by my first name as if I am her own daughter. Though Gulab Didi could not understand that the mother was hurt because she was being prevented from coming to the master. Because of her, she was denied even the little privilege she had to serve the master and listen to some nice words from him. She, Sri Ramakrishna could understand it. And then he scolded Gulabma. He said, no, you should go back early. It inconveniences her. She has to wait for you, and she waits till you go there, and that delays her. So one day Gulab Didi said to her, mother, said to her means said to the Holy Mother. Manmohan's mother says, the master is such a man of great renunciation. And yet, you see the Holy Mother, she wears earrings and other ornaments. Does it look well? You see, that is how the world is. The people criticize you even if you are, whether you are good or bad. Whatever you do, you cannot wait, and you can't expect people to always have a favorable opinion. There is a nice story which Sri Ramakrishna used to say. He said it in a different context, but this is the story, parable which comes in the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. It is one of the parables, famous parables of Sri Ramakrishna, that there was a monk who had given up everything. He gave up sleeping on, he used to sleep on the floor, and he used to eat only once in a day, beg for food. He had no possessions and lived under a tree and performed and practiced all the austerities that monks are, in those days, monks used to perform. So, but he had one so-called luxury. It was not a luxury, but he used a brick in place of a pillow, because he could not sleep on the floor, bare floor. So he just used a brick so that he gets some support for the head. So he took a nice brick and kept it, and he used to sleep under the tree, under that, using that brick. So the passers-by, who were naturally worldly people, even in these monks, they used to find faults. So that is why Holy Mother used to say, I pray to the sun, pray to the bright moon, the spotless moon. Even the moon has some spots, but let my mind not have these spots. What she meant was, let me not see the faults of others. There are many people who can see faults and whose whole job in their life, but it is very harmful. So she used to believe that let my mind be as spotless as the even the moon has spots, but let my mind not have these spots. So this monk was criticized for using a brick. Somebody, some passerby who had no business to comment. He himself is a householder, and he had the courage or maybe the foolishness to comment, and he commented, said, see this monk, he cannot live without a brick. Even he wants the luxury of a brick. Now, that person, of course, the context was different, as that monk got angry on him when he should not have, because you see, after all, the people who commented like this, they were ignorant. So if they are ignorant, they will say many things. So you don't should not take these things seriously. But here also one devotee, not knowing the greatness of Holy Mother, seeing Sri Ramakrishna's renunciation, he thought, why does Holy Mother wear earrings and other ornaments? Actually, they were made by uh, Sri Ramakrishna for her, because he was very sad that after Holy Mother's marriage, they had hired or they had borrowed some ornaments for her. And since he believed that he had deprived her when she was sleeping, when small child, she was just 5 years old. At that time, uh, they had dressed her with the bride. The bride was dressed with all these ornaments, which they had borrowed from their neighbors because they were so poor that they could not afford. So they had to remove this. And Sri Ramakrishna himself, quietly, when the girl was asleep, he removed those ornaments and they returned it to the owners. And in the morning, she cried. So Thakur had felt very bad. So when he managed to, whatever little money he got, he used to save it. And he bought, so at the first possible opportunity, he bought some ornaments for Holy Mother. Now she used to wear that. She used to wear those things. For a few days she wore, but perhaps that was the Divine Mother's wish that even that she should not wear. So next morning, when Holy Mother heard this, some devotees commenting, see, the master has renounced everything and Holy Mother wears these earrings and other ornaments. Does it look well? I mean, indirectly he was criticizing. So next morning, Mother quietly removed all the other ornaments, but she did not remove her bracelets, gold bracelets, which Thakur had made for her. And he had specially made those things for her. Then, surprised at this, Golap Ma asked Mother why she had done this. Golap asked Holy Mother. The mother replied, Golap said, and some conversation took place. After much persuasion, Yogin says, I succeeded in making her put on all the earrings and one or two other ordinary ornaments. But she never again put on all the ornaments she had taken off, because just after this, the master fell ill. She did it. She was convinced. She said, just because somebody criticizes, some stranger comes and criticizes, why do you take it so seriously? But Holy Mother followed it and then she had removed it. But then they all convinced her to wear those earrings. But after that, the master fell ill and then she permanently removed it and never wore it. When the Holy Mother first came to Dakshineshwar, she didn't understand much about household problems, because you see, the problems which a city, a house in the city are quite different from that of the village. In the village, there are so many people, neighbors who help you. In the city, it is rather difficult. And the problems are also quite difficult in a city like Calcutta. And she didn't understand much about all the household problems, how to manage, because so many guests never came in the village. Here, there was a constant flow of disciples, devotees, and she had to cook so many things. And then, because of the visitors, she had to finish all her ablutions and bath and all in the morning. So much of adjustment she had to do. So she had not experienced these household problems. Only after coming to Calcutta, she in Dakshineshwar, she had to face these problems. And within the village, Yogin Maharaj says, Yogin Ma says that she did not experience trances also. That doesn't mean she was not practicing spiritual sadhana, but here she performed so much of japa that though people compared her with Sri Ramakrishna used to go into samadhi now and then, but those who were very close, like Yogin Ma, all very often found mother going into a strange kind of trance because of a high state of meditation. So it's not that Holy Mother did not have these experiences, but they were not highlighted because Sri Ramakrishna was the center of all attraction, at least till he lived. It is only afterwards Holy Mother came into prominence. In fact, even after the passing away of Sri Ramakrishna, it took a lot of time to understand the deep significance. If Swamiji had not written to some of the direct disciples about the importance of Holy Mother, in fact, he said, because perhaps Sri Ramakrishna had confided it to him, that in this incarnation, he mentioned three things: that the avatara has left his Shakti to do much more than what he did. In all the previous incarnations, the Shakti had a secondary role. She was just a spiritual companion to the avatara, Rama's wife Sita, Krishna, and then Radha, and all the other uh, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Vishnu Priya, Buddha's wife. They played a secondary role. The main role was played by the incarnation of the Prophet himself, even though they were married. But at the same time, if in this life also, till the master was alive, Holy Mother was not in the picture at all. She quietly lived and was accumulating a lot of spirituality. That is what uh, Yogin Ma is pointing out here, that when she first came to Dakshineshwar, she did not experience a lot of trances. Trances in the sense spiritual, high spiritual samadhi and these states. Though she devotedly practiced meditation and japa every day, we did not hear of her going into samadhi. Whereas if you see Sri Ramakrishna, practically every day he was going into samadhi so many times. Rather, she even became very frightened and worried at the sight of the master's samadhi. We know very well that when she first came, she saw so many times Sri Ramakrishna going into samadhi. And then, because the master felt, Sri Ramakrishna felt that if I go into samadhi, she gets frightened, because there was no knowing, unless you are an expert, you do not know whether a person is dead or whether he has gone into samadhi. It was so difficult that to chant the name of the Lord in his ear and somehow bring him down. It was so difficult for him to come to the ordinary plane. So naturally, when she came from the village from Jairambati for the first time to live in Dakshineshwar, she found it strange. But Hriday and others who were here, who were trained in this kind of seva, they used to handle it properly. And she was worried. So Yogin Ma felt that perhaps Holy Mother was not spiritually empowered enough to experience this state. So there she says, I heard from her own lips that during her first visit to Dakshineshwar, the master had asked her to stay with him at night. In those days, the master and the mother slept in the same room. The master used to occupy a larger bed and the mother the smaller cot, which he later on, he used to use that small cot for meeting visitors. The mother would say, the master used to pass through spiritual trances, so I could not sleep. Out of fright, I used to keep almost inert, wondering all the time when the night would end. So she was, because she had never experienced that a person can go into samadhi and not come back to the normal state. So whether he will fall down or whatever, she was terribly worried. Then I became much worried and sent for Hriday, the through Kali's mother, the maid servant. There was a maid servant there. So Kali's mother, her name was Kali's mother. Normally, people did not call women by their name. They would call them by either the husband's name, or so and so's wife, or so and so's mother. Kali means Kali Prasad or somebody, his mother. So Hriday came and repeated aloud the name of the Lord. that this made him regain his consciousness. So Hriday knew this. Sri Ramakrishna had often gone into samadhi and he had trained some people, including Hriday, to uh, chant certain mantras if they found him in a trance so that he could be brought down to the normal plane. The next day, the master taught me means Holy Mother. So this is recorded by Yogin Ma. So Holy Mother said, he taught me a particular mantra and I would have to utter at each kind of spiritual trance into which he entered. So there were different mantras. In a different kind of trance, he had to be brought down by a particular mantra. So all those things he gave to the Holy Mother. So that's why they say that somebody was asking, how does the spiritual tradition of the Ramakrishna order, what is the sequence? I mean, did Sri Ramakrishna initiate Holy Mother, or did she give the mantras to all her disciples directly? But here we find that most of the mantras which were used on God with form. You see here, Sri Ramakrishna used to merge into the formless aspect of Brahman. Samadhi means you go into Nirvikalpa Samadhi. You may begin with a form, but when you lose the concept or the idea of the form, when Sri Ramakrishna practiced Advait Sadhana, if you remember, Totapuri, he used to complain to Totapuri in the beginning. When he went to the Kutia, he gave him formal sannyas and then he said, you meditate on the Maha Mantra, which is the mantra for going into Nirvikal Samadhi, the Upanishadic mantra, maybe Aham Brahmasmi, all the different traditions, monastic traditions, the monistic or the Advaita traditions, they have these Mahavakyas from the Upanishads, Tattvamasi or Aham Brahmasmi, Prajnanam Brahma. These mantras are uttered when one reaches a very high state of meditation. Then the Guru utters it in the disciples' ears. And when he utters it, the impact of the sound itself creates a concept of the, it is known as Nirakara Vritti in the mind. You see, we discussed in Patanjali's Yoga Sutras that different vrittis, the bigger vritti follows the smaller vrittis. That's why you emphasize one particular vritti. Say you are meditating on Krishna or maybe Rama or Ramakrishna or Buddha or any form. In the initial stages, you take that form and subdue all the other samskaras, all the other vrittis by meditating on this particular vritti with form. So Sri Ramakrishna did that and he meditated on his divine mother, which was Bhavatarani Kali. But when Totapuri came, he said, meditate on the formless. But he said, I can't do it. Of course, it was meant for us so that people who practice sadhana, they come to understand the different levels of sadhana that person has to do. So when he was meditating, he said, I try my best, but it simply goes and focuses on the Divine Mother Kali. I can't get rid of that form. Though you say, try to merge in the Nirakara Brahman, I can't do it. So that Nirakara Vritti is a Vritti which swallows all the other Vrittis, the Sakara Vritti of the Divine Mother. So then Totapuri says, he takes a glass piece and he says, now you focus here between the eyebrows. He pushes that glass, and then if you read the biography of Sri Ramakrishna, the great master, it is there. He tells, Totapuri tells Sri Ramakrishna that use the sword of discrimination, and the form that you are seeing, the form which has swallowed, the form of Bhavatarani Ma Kali, which has swallowed all other forms, smaller forms, the petty desires, the petty samskaras, all the vrittis have been consumed by the most powerful meditation on Bhavatarani. Even that is an impediment now. So you take a sword of discrimination, and cut through that bond of Maya and cut that form so that no form remains. And when Sri Ramakrishna did that, he was finding it very painful. How can I destroy the form on which I have meditated for years and years together. How can I do it? So he destroyed, when he used his discrimination to say that this form and the formless Brahman, the Purusha, and the Parama Prakriti, the Parama Prakriti and Purusha are one. What does it mean? When it takes the form, name and form, and when we see the manifest universe, she is the lower Prakriti. She manifests its herself as lower Prakriti. But Shakti, Avyakta, in the Avyakta form, in the non-manifest form, that Parama Prakriti is one with the Param Purusha. So he actually, when the sword of discrimination to cut the form means to cut that name and form which creates this universe. So you go back to the creator, you go back to the Purusha, you go back to Brahman. So Brahman and Shakti are Abhed. Thakur and Holy Mother, Yogananda said something very significant, because he was not initiated by Swami by Sri Ramakrishna himself, though he was a direct disciple. Somehow you find that in a dream one day he tells Holy Mother, see, I have not initiated yoga, and you give him Diksha. And on the other hand, he also appeared in a dream and told Yogananda that, "Hey, you have not taken Diksha, you need to take Diksha to realize these truths. So you go to Holy Mother." So the first disciple of Holy Mother was Swami Yogananda. He was the first to whom she gave the mantra. So naturally, the mantra tradition, Sri Ramakrishna has uttered all these mantras which enabled Holy Mother, or even Hriday, because Hriday used to repeat certain names. Whether he was serious or not, we do not know. He was a very materialistic person, so the mantra would not have done any benefit. It's only Thakur's grace which saved him at the end, because he had served Sri Ramakrishna very well. But I think Sri Ramakrishna's giving mantra to Hriday, he did not make much use of it. He used to just see when Sri Ramakrishna is in a trance, he used to go and repeat those mantras, the particular mantras which had to be uttered to bring him down. So it is natural that Holy Mother would have got all the mantras from Sri Ramakrishna himself, all the gods with form. Each one represents a particular deity. That particular deity has a particular name and form. Maybe it is a concept. When we say Ma Kali, it has a particular form and a particular name, Bhavatarini, and that has a bija. So the bija comes from the avyakta, the unmanifest. That is one with Brahman, and that emerges out of the supreme Shabda Brahman, which is known as Om. So normally Om is followed by a bija which represents a particular deity and which helps us to meditate on the aspect of the deity on which is our Ishta. It can be Ramakrishna, it can be any deity. With each deity, and the great thing about Sri Ramakrishna as an Ishta is that he can, since he is Sarva Deva Devi Swarupa, you can attach any bija to him, many bijas to him. And I think most of these mantras which have come down, which have Sri Ramakrishna's name, they were applied, these bijas might have been applied to different deities, but then they can fit in with Sri Ramakrishna's name, because any deity, male or female, whether it is, because these bijas are specific. Kali has a particular bija, Krishna has a particular, the male deity Krishna has a particular bija. So this bija, idea of bija, which is a gift of the tantras, the original sound symbols which were heard or perceived, you may say, it's not just heard by the ears. There is a wonderful, if I get a chance, maybe on some Raj Yoga class, I'll discuss about the value of sound in our life, how sound plays. That is why we give so much of importance to the sound. Sound can, we take the words that we speak, the things that we read. When we read also, we have certain sounds associated with those words. They are having some sound symbol representing that word. You can't read something without reproduce the echo of that word, which is a sound, is there in the mind. Whether you read, whether you think in words, there is a sound symbol attached to it. So also each deity has a bija associated with it. So here, when the master gave certain mantras to Holy Mother, it was to tell her that when I go into Nirvikalpa Samadhi, to reverse the process, if I have to come back to this mundane world and live amongst you, I have to be brought down from that formless state to the state with form. And then you need a mantra. Even to go enter into, it is like a key. It opens both ways. You have a chavi. Bija means actually it is a key. So you need a chavi, you need a key to open the door. And if you are inside, you need the key to come out also. So that is how Sri Ramakrishna used to train his disciples and train Holy Mother, especially, to whom I think he has given the whole repository of mantras, which has come down as in a tradition, and which helped her. And this he trained even before the direct disciples came. So she was not only the first disciple, you may say, but she came quite early when she got all the spiritual training, all the mantras. In fact, Holy Mother says one day Thakur called her. Don't think he just taught her all the secular things, how to behave, how to not waste water, how to clean, how to light a lamp, how to keep things in their proper place, right from the smallest secular thing to the highest spiritual truths. Everything Sri Ramakrishna had trained her. So he was her her guru, but at the same time he taught her and handed over the whole repository. So all the mantras and all the spiritual tradition, the spiritual power which was Sri Ramakrishna's, is part of Holy Mother. You cannot distinguish. So whether the mantra has come from Sri Ramakrishna, definitely it has come. He realized all these mantras and taught it to Holy Mother, so that from formless he can come down to a state where he can live with forms. And then your mother says, he taught me all these mantras. And then she used to utter that particular mantra, because there were certain signs which, suppose he was listening to some song on Krishna, and after that he went into samadhi. That means some kind of Krishna mantra with a Krishna bija associated with that would be used to bring him down. So people would know when he's in a particular mood, he's in a particular mood of the Divine Mother, then maybe the Kali bija or the Durga bija would be used with the mantra, of course, and that would be uttered loudly or maybe in his ear, and to bring him down. So that is what this great phenomena, as Christopher Isherwood says, Sri Ramakrishna's life is not just a human life, it is a phenomena which has happened. It doesn't happen in history very often, very rarely. But the second thing which is most important in this incarnation, which Swami Vivekananda very clearly said, it was Holy Mother who lived for 34 years more and carried. Sri Ramakrishna herself instructed her, not only in these mantras, but to carry forward the tradition. And he said, in this age, it is the age of women's true spiritual empowerment. And women will take forward this spiritual movement which Sri Ramakrishna had started. So he wanted to emphasize, now when we talk of women's empowerment, we talk only of material empowerment, economic empowerment, social empowerment, but have we empowered women in the true sense of the term? That is what Sri Ramakrishna wanted. The highest empowerment is the spiritual empowerment. And from that plane, if a woman, Sri Ramakrishna and Susrima Sharda, the only difference is they were born with different genders. So Swami Vivekananda had the insight, the spiritual insight, or maybe Sri Ramakrishna himself had told him to depend on Holy Mother for any decision or any, because they were feeling helpless. Now you are not, you're refusing, because they wanted the master to be cured, but he was refusing to be cured of his cancer. And they were wondering what will, then he must have definitely told that you don't worry. And that's why that shows the tremendous faith Swami Vivekananda and some of his Guru Bhais like Yogananda, who was the first disciple of Holy Mother, they had in Holy Mother. And she was very unassuming. Nobody knew that she also had her own share of spiritual trances because all the tradition was handed over to her. We only know that Sri Ramakrishna said, I have become a fakir, I have given all my power to you, to Swamiji, because he did not have to give the power to Ma Sharda Devi. She was already full of that power. She was just had to be made conscious so that she carried on the mission and continued to guide Narendra and all the other disciples. So Yogin Ma, unfortunately, Yogin Ma, Gulab Ma, they only knew that she's a mother, she loves her, she's the wife of Sri Krishna. So most of the direct disciple, most of the householder disciples and some direct disciples also thought that it is because of Sri Krishna that Holy Mother is great. They never knew that Holy Mother was great in her own capacity, and it is only a different manifestation that Sri Krishna chose to manifest his spiritual truths, and the tradition continued not only for 1 year or 2 years after his Mahasamadhi, but 34 very long years in which so many direct disciples, including Yogananda, passed away. Some of the disciples passed away before her. So the once what happened, now this all these things Holy Mother is recording and asking or maybe speaking to Yoginma, so that maybe her intention was that these things have to be recorded, but we do not know. But Holy Yoginma, somehow from her memory, she told all these things and put it down, or maybe somebody must have put it down in Bengali, and that is how the gospel of Holy Mother has come to us. But that came much, much, much later, because as I said, until Swami Vivekananda said that you don't know the significance of Holy Mother, she was not taken very seriously even by her own companions. But anyway, sometimes Holy Mother would reveal her greatness. So a few days after I had been acquainted with the mother, Yogin Mase, she was very new. She was thinking, okay, she's just preparing roti and like an ordinary housewife. She's saving. Oh, Thakur is great. He is full of wisdom and great people come to him. Mother is living in the corner of an Allahabad. She prepares pan and all those things and roti and sabji. Okay, they were not taking her seriously. And they also noticed that she doesn't have those, at least she does not publicly demonstrate all these trances. So after getting acquainted, she had the courage to ask, Mother, Mother, she said to me, Holy Mother, anticipating this, she said to me, please tell him, just to see, please tell him that I would like to experience a little of spiritual ecstasy. I don't find him alone to speak about this matter myself. Now you see, this is how Mahamaya, Holy Mother, hid her divinity. She did not want to tell this Yogin Ma that I also experience all these spiritual trances. So she said, why don't you go and tell the master himself, because I don't get a chance to speak to him. You people are serving him. So, and she was not unhappy about that also. Then Yogin Ma went, I thought it was quite all right since the request was from Holy Mother herself that I should convey it to the master. The next morning when I went to his room, the master was seated alone on his bed. After saluting him, I informed him of the mother's request. He listened without replying. Now you see, this is very important. He listened and became very grave. When he was in such a serious mood, no one dared utter a word. Thakur was normally very childlike and anybody could approach him. But when certain things were expressed, he would become very grave. So they knew that if Thakur becomes serious, when he heard Holy Mother is asking for this, we do not know what was in his mind, but he became very grave. And when he was in such a serious mood, Yoginma knew that I should not press further. I should go. But he got the message, and you see what happened afterwards. So I left the room after sitting there quietly for a while. She knew I should not press further. He has not given me an answer. There is a reason for that. And he has become very serious when I told these things. When she returned to the Nahabat, she found Holy Mother seated for her daily worship. I opened the door a little and peeped in, found her laughing. Now she was laughing and now she was weeping. Tears were streaming from her eyes. After a while, she gradually became still. I knew she was in Samadhi because she had seen Thakur before. So I closed the door and came away. After a long while, I again went to her room and asked. She was afraid to go there. She never seen Holy Mother in such a deep trance and behaving in spiritual ecstasy. She's laughing and crying. So it was very unnatural. She was so unassuming and she never showed her spiritual experiences, did not display it. So I closed the door and uh, uh, then when she again went to the room, she asked me, "Are you just returning from the master's room?" Then Yogin Ma said, "How is it, mother, that you say you never experienced such high spiritual modes?" Then mother just smiled. That means this was a, not that she did not have these states, but she knew that my disciple or Sri Ramakrishna's disciple Yogin Ma has this doubt. So a true guru understands what is in the mind of the disciple. If she has that faith that only Sri Ramakrishna has these trances, now she could have told it directly, but through this, she made her go to Sri Ramakrishna. And Sri Ramakrishna, why did he become grave? Because he thought, what is there I can give to Holy Mother? She is the whole divine mother herself. So why he had asked so he became very serious because of this. What a foolish thing. Perhaps he thought, what a foolish thing this Yogin Ma is asking. She is Shakti herself and she is not different from me. So naturally, whatever I have, whatever spiritual states I have attained, she can easily attain. She is suppressing it. And this young girl, Yogin Ma, is not able to understand. So Holy Mother just smiled. So that explains how she kept herself quite aloof and did not make a show of all her spiritual experiences. Then she says, Yogin Ma says, I began to spend occasionally some nights with her at Dakshineshwar because Thakur's mother, Sri Ramakrishna's mother, had passed away. So the Nahabat, the upper room of the Nahabat was where she used to live, was free. So many of the women disciples would uh, stay there. Sometimes she wanted to sleep in the same room, though it was a very small room, but uh, she used to live with Holy Mother, and Holy Mother wanted her sometimes, though the area was very small, somehow she used to allow her to sleep in her own room. One day, somebody began to play on the flute. At the sound of the flute, the mother entered because these things she could record because she was sleeping in the same room. Otherwise, they would have thought mother is just relaxing and she does not experience all these spiritual states. So, as soon as she heard the flute, the mother entered into a high spiritual mood and she laughed every now and then as if she's seeing some vision. With hesitation, I sat on a corner of the bed for a long time. And I thought that I, being a worldly person, should not touch her at that moment. After a long while, she just watched with wonderment what type of spiritual, just the sound of a flute would transport her into that holy Vrindavan, maybe who knows what vision she had. And that surprised Yoginma. Then whatever doubts she had about the Holy Mother not getting spiritual states and not getting spiritual trances was removed from her mind. So this is how the uh, incarnations, they they remove all the doubts of the disciples. It is very natural, very human to have doubts about certain things which we see. What we see, what we perceive is very often not the right thing. To understand something through experience intuitively is quite different than what we see on the surface. So one day, she is telling about another incident, I'll close with this. One day on the roof of Balram Bose's house, the mother passed into Samadhi while she was meditating. After she regained external consciousness, she said, Now this is Holy Mother is explaining to Yoginma the wonderful state she was in when she was meditating. When she comes back to external consciousness, she says, I found that I had traveled to a faraway country. There, everybody showed me great tenderness. My appearance became exceedingly beautiful. The master was present. Affectionately, he made me sit by his side. I can't describe the joy I felt at that time. When I regained a little body consciousness, I noticed my body lying nearby. Then I began to wonder, how can I enter into that hideous corpse? I didn't feel the least inclined to get into it once again. After a long while, I persuaded myself to enter into it and I regained my body consciousness. So, this shows what a high state. Can you imagine somebody, as it were, transcending the limits of the body? Now, we all know she, after the passing away of Sri Ramakrishna, she lived for a very long time. And she was in on the roof of Balram Bose's house. That means many years had passed. She had become quite old, and the body also was quite weak. It was quite dark because of the hard strain which was imposed upon that body. And she naturally, that uh, figure which was bony, skinny, and she looked so old when she was nearly 60 or in that age. When she was towards the end of her life, she looked like that. So when she was on Balram Bose's roof of his house, she felt that she just left her body and then went to a foreign country, faraway country. Now, Sri Ramakrishna also had a similar vision where he saw some white people. In those days, anybody coming from abroad normally were white. So they were thinking that, not thinking, that racial difference was very keenly felt in the country. They thought anybody who came from faraway countries were fair because of the weather and because of the color of their skin. So naturally, when the mind travels to this faraway country, the visions that she had would have been of some other country other than India, which was a strange land. And then he saw Master coming there. So these have tremendous, it has a wonderful significance that the power that came as Sri Ramakrishna, the power that came as Sri Ma Sharda Devi has its impact. That's why we see so many times. There was a center in Brazil where somebody, some unknown person had a vision of Sri Ramakrishna. We know of many, many cases, many, many instances in foreign countries where quite miraculously people have had the vision of Sri Ramakrishna, of Holy Mother, and they got inspired and motivated by their teachings, their life, and somehow uh, developed their spirituality according to this tradition. So these are all signs. And when she again came back from that high state, high vision, so that shows that these incarnations don't need a body. The body is just something which lasts for some time. And that is why she says, I was not inclined to go back into this body, because they feel that they can work even without the body. They are present even now. Sri Ramakrishna said the Ramakrishna form will stay for thousands and thousands of years till all the people get the spiritual, but those who are belonging to that Bhavdara. So the subtle body continues to stay, to continues to live. And the subtle form, which can choose to work through a body if it so wants. As Swami Vivekananda said, Sri Ramakrishna could have chosen any gross body to spread his message. But I am fortunate that he used my body. Maybe for 40 years, 39 years, he used Swamiji's body. But he was not attached to it. He was a rishi. So he said he chose to use this body. It is my privilege. He can easily choose and any gross body and act through them. So also Holy Mother must have felt, what is this old body which is so weak and so full of diseases? They transcend the gross and then they realize that they can act even without the body. So after a long while, as Sri Ramakrishna used to do, utter the mantras and come back to the body, which used to call a cage of flesh and bones. That is the disgust with which they considered their body to be. So when Swamiji asked him to pray to Divine Mother Bhavatarni, to cure his cancer, he said, what this is this cage of flesh and blood that you are attached to? So that is the kind of vairagya these people have. What do you mean by a state where you lose your body consciousness? This is exactly, unless we hear these incidents, these things may be in the Upanishads, these things may be in the Bhagavad Gita, but we don't get a practical demonstration of the fact that one can leave the body and feel a great hesitation to go back into it. You see, she says, how can I enter into that hideous, she looks like a corpse. You imagine you suddenly leave the body and then you find it's a very old body, especially when you become old, you somehow don't feel very comfortable. And then the spirit which has gone out has to enter that body, because still the karma, or in this case, there's no karma to be worked out, but there is some divine play left. So Sri Ramakrishna would have asked her to go back. So she had a vision where she saw she could do so many wonderful things, and she says, I can't describe the joy, because this disembodied existence, or this disembodied, if one voluntarily or consciously raises the mind to that plane without even leaving the body, it's not only after death, it can happen when while he's living. So even for a fraction of a second, if for a few minutes, if we have this vision, or even if we have a dream, here she was meditating, she was fully conscious and she got this vision. But even in the dream, if we get a feeling that some people say that they get these dreams that they are coming out of the body and the body is being burnt on a funeral pyre, and they feel great joy that there's nothing bad that has happened. Something which was binding me has gone. That's all. So that is what really spiritual people, they have this feeling even before they enter into, they leave this body. They might have had such experiences. So this is what Holy Mother said, and these were recorded by Yogin Ma because she described her intimate experiences. Otherwise, the world would have never known. Had not Sri Ramakrishna mentioned it, had not M recorded the gospel, we would not have known. Had not Holy Mother spoken of her experiences, such wonderful experiences, we would have thought she just spent her whole time maybe cooking for Sri Ramakrishna as long as he was alive, and then wandering, going to different places, initiating some people. That does not end with that. She had a much greater mission, and she still has. It's not that that Leela is over. If she could leave the body when she was still in the body and reluctantly enter the body, you can imagine the range of their influence. If she can go to some foreign country even while she was in the body, so what about the state of that personality, that Shakti, that divine Shakti which manifests as Holy Mother in that particular body? When after her Mahasamadhi, she becomes one with the whole universe, one with the Prakriti that she creates. So that is why on this these reminiscences of Yogin Ma and all other people who were very intimate, to whom she confided very reluctantly. Sometimes it might have escaped her. Otherwise, she was very reticent about speaking about her own experiences. She always used to say, Sri Ramakrishna's wish, if it is there, he will give you. You will also get all this experience. But she never said that I can give you, though she could very easily give. So there is absolutely no difference, as Yogananda said. The more I see Holy Mother, I see that same thing which manifests as Sri Ramakrishna is manifesting as Holy Mother. So I'll close today. We have taken a little more time. And there is a question, but now there is one question I will answer. Rajiv Samanta is asking, people would call one Nastik. A person tends to challenge some of the beliefs of the disciples or some understanding between guru-disciple relationship with common sense or science. What would be said about this? Now, nobody says Nastik. In fact, most of the philosophies of India, all the six systems of philosophy, some of which were intensely materialistic, or you may say scientific. Now, by scientific doesn't mean material science alone. Spirituality is also a science. So, only thing we should say, just as an engineer would not be able to understand the subtleties of medicine. So he can't say that I do not believe in medicine, because there are people who are using medicine or using the techniques of medicine to do some miraculous cures. We are noticing this. But for that reason, if the engineer says, I don't believe because my engineering skill, my engineering knowledge of the material world does not tally with the medical doctor or with the psychiatrist. The psychiatrist is doing his own job. He knows something about the mind. He may not know anything about the material science. So, if it does not satisfy the yardstick of my knowledge, I think I don't believe. But he is not a Nastic. According to Indian tradition, all the six systems of philosophy, including the Charvakas, they were not Nastikas. Charvakas were Nastikas, but all the other philosophies which believed in atoms and molecules, just as science did, the science does now. So the only thing is, the limitation of science is that they focus more on the external world, the gross world, and to some extent, the subtle world of mind, but that also in connection with the body mind medicine. Then we have psychiatry, which deals with the mind, though they don't know what this mind is, how the thoughts are created. They think it's a product of the biological product of the certain chemicals, but you can't explain. You can explain certain emotions, tendencies through the chemical imbalances in the human body, but the core thoughts, the creative thoughts, the intuitive thoughts are beyond the scope of material science. Though some fourth generation psychology and all, they try to explain these things independent of the physical existence. So when you say when you say science or common sense or science, common sense is not as common as we think. What we say is common sense is according to the knowledge, the repository of knowledge that we have been given. If we have been taught only material science, it is like, there was a joke I remember once. In a school, there is a principal and one elephant and a dog and some 4 or 5 animals have been admitted to that same school. So you can't teach the dog the way you teach an elephant. You can't teach the cat or some other bird in the same way. You can't put them in the same class. So different sciences apply different yardsticks. True science, or true common sense for that matter, means that you apply the knowledge of that particular field in which you have a direct experience or perception. So if you, unfortunately, if some person does not have the knowledge of how laboratory science works, you go to a tribal and say oxygen, the two gases combine together and you get water, he will laugh. Said, how is it possible? How can water come out of two gases? If you have to explain to him, he has to go to the kindergarten, he has to understand what molecules are, what atoms are, what electrons are, how the chemical reactions take place, how gases get converted into solids, liquid. So there is an entire science. So that is how the scientific approach to religion or to spirituality is necessary. Scientific approach means you use the methods of rationality. Definitely, it's not a question of faith of a disciple and the guru. So you cannot say a person is Nastic just because he cannot understand certain things. So if he doesn't understand physics because he is a biologist, you can't say he's a fool, because he knows his biology very well, much better than the physicist knows his physics. So he is a master of his field. So his science or his logic or his rationality or his common sense is valid within the parameters of biology or the parameters of physics. So they have to learn to appreciate each other's skill. because they have been educated in a particular way. So also, when you talk about these spiritual experiences, it is not that the experiences were unique to Narendranath or his guru. Even Narendranath did not believe. He approached Sri Ramakrishna with a scientific spirit. He said, I don't believe in your trances. In fact, he said in the beginning that he talks like a madman. I don't know whether, but when he said, there is not only I have seen God, but I can show it to you. And not only that, the God experience or the divine experience or the experience of unitary consciousness, which we, just because we don't experience it, we cannot say it is untrue. And that is what happened to Narendranath. He came as a student and he thought he is a madman. He's talking that Brahman is everywhere. How can the Brahman in the court be the Brahman in the vati, the cup here? What nonsense he is talking. My science does not explain to me, does not give a satisfactory answer. So I don't not going to believe this person. He's a good person, he's a nice person, a pure person. I come to him, but I will not accept his. So he came as a scientist, and he had an experience of the all-pervading consciousness by one touch of the master. Now, how can you discount that? It's not just between the guru and disciple. He had never accepted him as a guru till almost a few days before his passing away. Even then, he had doubts. So he tested his guru. He wrote to Sister Nivedita, I tested my guru for 6 years. And that is how my conviction has grown. And every time I tried to test him, I failed the test and he proved to me in a very scientific way. So the disciples, or some understand, it's not between guru-disciple relationship alone. It has, if one has common sense, one has to see the effect it has. When we judge a Nobel laureate or a famous doctor, we judge him not by what his degree he has, but by the amount of surgery he has done, how successful he has been. Oh, then we say, experience tells me that he is a very successful physician, though he may have a degree. But there is a difference between people, even in a very secular field. So also with all fields. So it is a question of experience, the question of influence, the power to influence many people, and the tradition, which unless it has some value, it does not continue. If a person is not genuine, or a person is not a master of his field and does not speak what he is perceiving and not able to communicate it to others, then he would not get followers, or nor would he, the tradition would continue beyond a few generations. We see that happening. People who have had no experience, when they try to teach others, it is like ordinary professors. You go to an ordinary professor, he'll give you only what he knows, and then you end up as a failed doctor or a failed engineer. But if you go to some prestigious university where a lot of hard work has been done and the knowledge has been handed in a particular way, in a particular tradition, that's why people spend so much money to go to these universities, because this tradition has produced men and scientists of exemplary character, and not character but exemplary knowledge and ability. So also in the spiritual field, it's not a question of any guru or any disciple. You have to go back to the source, go back to the tradition, and not take anything on belief, but take it, uh, even if you take it on belief, it has to be verified in the laboratory of your personal experience. Then there is the common sense tells us, or science, the purely scientific approach tells us, that there's no harm in accepting this belief. We begin with a belief. We begin with a belief that if I go to Oxford, I'll get a nice degree. But only after we get it, we can say that, oh, I have got this degree now and I know its value because I have struggled for it. So also in the religious path, you may begin with belief, but it should not end with belief. It should be tested in a very scientific way. We're full of common sense. Common sense is more necessary in the realm of spirituality. Unfortunately, as you said, this common sense is not very common. That's why you find so many people being misled by non-traditional ways of spiritual spirituality being given from one person to another, and then they suffer because they have not bothered to find. Just as you don't bother to find out if your university is genuine or not, you just get admitted. You don't do that even in secular field. So in spiritual field also, one has to be very particular, and then you will see that things will fall into the right place. And when we are fit, just as you finish your degree or masters or postdoctoral research in a university, the more you study in a traditional university, in a university with good reputation, you will find that your knowledge not only strengthens you but also gives you it is just common sense to understand this and to put our faith and belief in some time tested institutions, time tested traditions. These are very important. Gita, Upanishads, and all this, Swami Vivekananda and all, they are all time tested prophets, time tested people, Jesus, and there's so many uh, people. We can't just hitch our wagon to any particular moment which has no connection with any great tradition before it, and then we will come to grief, just like getting admission into any XYZ university and expecting to win a Nobel Prize. So I think I've answered the question. Thank you. I'll take your leave now. We'll meet tomorrow for the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna class at 5:30. Om Shanti 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 Hari Om.